heard you were looking for stories from the cesspool called Los Angeles. Unfortunately, we can't choose where we were born, and I have the distinct honor of being born and raised in the city of demons. I could go into the litany of experiences I've had being harassed by drug addicts, chased by gang members, or was almost in the crossfire of a shootout. But I feel like all of you listening have heard stories like this before. They are a sad reality, but it isn't something that really surprises you, right? We've sadly become accustomed to the violence that takes place in the streets of America, especially LA. And no one seems to have the solution to the problem. However, every once in a while you hear a story that makes you pause and reflect on how fucked up it is. I'd like to think that this is one of those stories. Back in 2012, I worked for a small startup business that operated out of the St. Vincent Jewelry Center in downtown Los Angeles. I was an employee, but I was friends with the guys who founded the company. And I even shared an apartment with them. I didn't own a car at the time, but it usually wasn't an issue for me because I could carpool with one of my roommates to and from work. That was until they had to attend a meeting in San Francisco. I told them not to worry and that I would take a taxi to the office while they were away or would find a ride with someone else, but I ultimately decided to walk to our office space. At the time, I was looking for ways to burn a certain amount of calories each day and figured I could keep up with my fitness goals and save a trip to the treadmill by simply walking to work while my roommates were gone. The one downside was that the most direct path to the office took you straight through one of the worst areas of Skid Row. So, I would have to make sure to avoid this area. The day of, I walked to work, taking a route that avoided the danger zone. The only thing of note was seeing a homeless man passed out by a dumpster in an alley a few blocks away from my apartment building. Work went well that day. It was a bit busier than usual with the bosses being gone. It ended up being a 12-hour shift, so by the time we were done it was around 10 p.m. A coworker named Kevin and I decided to stop at a bar to finish off the day. This worked out for me because the place we went to was only a few blocks away from my apartment building and would shorten the distance I had to walk. So we drove to the bar, had some drinks, and called it a night. He offered to drive me to my apartment, but I insisted that I would walk the rest of the way. I knew that Kevin lived in Inglewood, so the sooner he left, the better. I don't remember the exact street names, but I knew the way back to my apartment from where I was, and that I wasn't near Skid Row, so I began to make my way down the street. It was uncharacteristically quiet. You could still hear the soundscape of the city in the distance, but the dim lighting and the lack of pedestrians made me feel a bit uneasy. About 5 minutes into the walk, and about 3 minutes from my destination, I passed by the alley where I had seen the homeless man from earlier. It was your typical city alleyway with dumpsters, drain pipes, and loading docks. However, there was somebody by one of the dumpsters with their back turned to me, crouching down. From the looks of it, it appeared to be an adult woman with her hair tied back into a ponytail. As soon as I saw her, I instantly knew something was off. I could hear these strange sounds like someone was tearing into a steak. I don't know why, any other day I would have just kept walking, but I was compelled to see what this woman was doing. Maybe she was sick or something. I cautiously approached. As I did, the wet sound grew louder. When it was about 5 yards away, I cleared my throat and asked, "Ma'am, are you okay?" The woman finally stopped what she was doing and stood up. She was wearing a pair of jeans and a light blue top. It didn't look like she was homeless. However, she did not turn around. I then heard her spitting something out without saying a single word to me. She took off down to the other side of the alley and disappeared. The alley was dark, and I had to use a small light on my keychain to see what the woman had been crouching over beside the dumpster. When I turned on my light, what I saw was the most disgusting and terrifying thing I have ever laid my eyes on. Lying on the ground was the homeless man from earlier. But his face was almost completely gone. It was just a bloody, gaping hole. Lying on his chest was his tongue. I instantly hunched over and vomited. I then ran the rest of the way back to my apartment and immediately told a security guard working in the lobby to call 911. I waited there for the police to show up so I could report what I saw. I never heard of any follow-ups or news reports about this incident, which is super surprising to me because that cannibal attack in Miami was big news around this time, but I guess the crackdown on gang-related violence was more of a priority for the LAPD back then. I had trouble sleeping for quite some time after this incident. The visage of that man's half-eaten face took a while for me to get over, and I still don't know what to make of what I saw in that dark alley. A seemingly normal-looking woman was crouched over a homeless man and was taking a bite out of him. I sometimes regret not seeing her face so I could have gave the police a more accurate description of the suspect, but sometimes I'm glad she never turned around. Moral of the story: if you can hitch a ride with someone you trust in downtown LA, do it. Last year I started law school in Los Angeles. I have never lived in a big city before and I was really excited to relocate to a massive city with over 4 million people. Ever since I was little, I always knew that I had a half-sister who lived in Los Angeles, but my parents always had this weird disposition toward her that always made it feel like a taboo topic. Of course, I had to look her up on social media. And I knew what she looked like, but that was about all I had to go on. We had never actually met and she was never that active on social media, so there wasn't a lot I could discern about her life. Out of nowhere, one day in my first year of law school, I received a friend request on Facebook from my half-sister. I had never seen this particular Facebook profile of hers before, but it seemed legitimate. She had lots of friends, and her profile picture resembled her. She sent me a message inviting me to a dinner party at a park with a couple of her friends. We could finally meet each other in person for the first time. I was actually new to Los Angeles, and I had no idea which parts of the city to avoid at night. I was excited about the idea, but I also had a lot of anxiety about it as well. It would be nice if we met and became besties for life. But what if we ended up sobbing together like we were in some dramatic movie scene? What if I tried to talk with her and she just didn't vibe with me and started showing me an attitude? Or worse, what if all was going well and we had some kind of disagreement, someone said something hurtful toward the other and then we both end up crying in front of everyone? Honestly, if she had suggested a cozy little bakery for desserts instead, I would have gone. But going to a park with other people didn't feel right to me, especially for an icebreaker. I thought it was like such a precious moment. I didn't want to have in front of all these other people I didn't know. A few weeks later, I googled that park just to see what it was like. Maybe we could still meet. Meet up there together, just one-on-one. That's when I learned something was off about this whole thing. I won't say the name of the park, but anyone who has lived in Los Angeles for long will tell you that it is not a safe place for a bunch of girls to have a dinner party there. The area surrounding that park has a very high violent crime rate. It's mostly controlled by gangs, even the people who conduct illegal business in that area, or forced to pay a tax to the gangs in order to be left alone. So now I was really concerned and curious. I actually tried to get a hold of my half-sister by other means. I found out that she was an undergrad at a local college. I had a friend who went to her school and I asked my friend to reach out to her on campus and see if she would be okay with meeting. They connected and the three of us met at my friend's house. And we got along well. The three of us had lots of fun. We weren't bursting into tears, but we did let out a few. We had dinner together, watched a movie, and spent the night at my friend's house. When I told my sister about the Facebook interaction, she told me that she hadn't used Facebook since high school. So clearly someone was impersonating her. I would have told her to report the fake account, but it had already been deleted. She knew that she had been impersonated on social media before. Another one of her friends had been scammed by someone pretending to be her. It was some scheme involving fake concert tickets or something like that. It's very disturbing to think about the big picture here. Someone had been impersonating my sister who knew I was in town, and they literally tried to lure me to one of the most dangerous parts of LA. I have no idea what their motives were. And I don't even think I want to find out. Meeting my half-sister after all these years ended up being a great thing for my life, but it almost ended up being terrifying. I'm a 27-year-old female, and this happened when I was 24. I live in Los Angeles, California, and have for my entire life. I was feeling lonely one day, so I decided to go onto Craigslist. Yeah, I know, very bad decision making. I tried to find someone to hang out with, not necessarily a date, just someone to chill with. If it led somewhere, then so be it. That was my naive thinking in those days. The free spirit mentality can really put you into some dangerous situations. I exchanged emails with a few guys, one of which stood out to me. He sent me some pictures and I was okay with how he looked. He seemed nice enough. I agreed to have him pick me up and grab a cup of coffee. It took him a lot longer than he said it would to get to my place, and once he arrived, I instantly regretted agreeing to this. But being overly polite and feeling awkward, I went along instead of heading to Starbucks as we planned. We drove to CVS. What are we doing here? I have to return some stuff real quick so I have some money for the drinks. I was super uncomfortable and just wanting to get out of there, but my shyness got the better of me and I just decided to wait it out. Once he returned, he said, "I have to stop by my apartment really quick. I forgot something." We pulled into an underground garage. Once we parked, he said, "Be right back." You have no idea how badly I just wanted to run as soon as he left, but I didn't. Once he got back into the car again, I could tell right away that he was high on something. Having been to rehab myself, it was obvious to me. I then told him that I had gotten an emergency phone call while he was upstairs and that I was sorry, but I had to be taken back. And that he could just drop me off at the nearest train station so he didn't have to drive me all the way back home. He nodded his head and the car ride became even more awkward than before. We soon got onto the freeway, which was the fastest route to the station, but we ended up passing the exit we had to take. I told him a few miles ahead of time. Hey, you just passed the exit. He just simply ignored me. Instead of pulling over to the right lanes, he kept pulling further and further over to the left until we were in the far left lane. I asked him what he was doing, trying to keep my cool. I don't remember his exact words, but it was something along the lines of, "I'm not dropping you off. We're going to have some fun together. Why do you think I did all this?" I looked at him with my jaw nearly dropping to the ground. I then asked him, "So you're refusing to drop me off?" "Yeah." He then sped up the car. The first thing I thought of was to call the police, so I pulled my phone out. He then reached over and hit me in the face so hard that I dropped my phone. I was in total shock. The phone had fallen somewhere below the driver's seat, so I couldn't get to it. I was now panicking. As we continued down the highway, I tried desperately to think of what I should do. We came up to another interstate, and for some reason, seeing the freeways intersect and how we were about to get onto a ramp was extremely alarming to me. We were getting further and further away from Los Angeles, and I decided right then and there that I could not allow him to get onto that next freeway. I couldn't jump out of the car. I would die instantly, so I did the only other thing I could think of. I took in a deep breath and grabbed the steering wheel, turning it as hard as I could to the right. He was so shocked that he didn't even try to grab it back from me as we side-swiped two other cars and eventually crashed into the side barrier. He then started hitting me while screaming. I put my legs up to block the blows from his fists. We had hit the side barrier, but he was able to regain control of the car and put some distance between the car and the barrier. While he was hitting me, I reached for the handle and fell backward out of the car. I quickly got up and ran to one of the cars we had crashed into. They were both pulled over behind us. The guy in the car had his phone out, presumably calling the police. I knocked on his window, screaming that this psycho had just tried to kidnap me. The guy's window had been down slightly before I knocked on it, but after I shouted at him, he rolled it up all the way. I couldn't believe it. When I looked back, Mr. Psycho was now coming towards me, as clearly no one was going to help me. "Fuck this noise," I said, and I ran toward the fencing beyond the concrete barrier. I'm already not in amazing shape, and I was even weaker because of what had just happened, so I literally had to lean on the fence until it bent enough for me to jump over it, crash landing hard on the other side. Luckily, instead of pursuing me, Mr. Psycho ran in the opposite direction and just left his car on the side of the freeway. Once I was over the fence, I realized that I was on some horse trails that I was familiar with. Because I had worked at the equestrian center nearby, so I just walked through the miles of trails until I got to the next nearest city, which was Burbank. I then called the cops from a bowling alley telephone. I never found out what happened to Mr. Psycho or my phone. The cops never followed up with me after I filed the report, but I hope he got in some kind of trouble for, trying to take me somewhere against my will to have some fun. There's always a reason to be afraid.